He handed over his card, and they laughed. Not just a small chuckle, but the kind of laugh that says you don't belong here. The next morning, he erased a multi-billion-dollar deal from existence. Just like that. Have you ever stepped somewhere that felt wrong before a word was even spoken? Where the air carried a warning, quiet, invisible, but sharp enough to cut? It was a Thursday night in Atlanta, humid but restless. The kind of evening that hums with stories waiting to happen. Elijah Moore stepped out of a black SUV, his shoes striking the pavement in steady rhythm. The valet straightened up when he saw him, crisp navy suit watch glinting faintly under the lights, luggage rolling smoothly behind. Calm confidence followed him like a shadow. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. Elijah was in town to finalize a $4 billion acquisition, the last chapter of a 2-year journey that could shift entire industries. But before that, he needed a night's rest. The Grand Crest Hotel stood tall in front of him. Marble walls, chandeliers like frozen rain, the scent of lavender and lemon polish floating through the lobby. It was the kind of place where they remember your name if you own something. Elijah did. But the moment he crossed the glass doors, eyes turned. Not in admiration, in that quiet disbelief people wear when the story in front of them doesn't match the one they expected. A couple by the coffee bar glanced, whispered, and looked away. 2 men near the elevator laughed softly under their breath. Elijah caught it all. He always did. Still, he kept walking, calm as a storm no one saw coming. At the front desk stood a young woman. Blonde braid, sharp nails, gum cracking between her teeth. Her name tag read Haley. She didn't look up until he was close enough to see the reflection of her screen in his cufflinks. "Checking in?" she asked, voice light, almost bored. "Yes," Elijah said with a polite nod. Reservation under Elijah Moore. Her fingers tapped across the keyboard. One moment. He waited, scanning the grand lobby, the kind of place designed to make you feel small even when you weren't. She looked up again. "All right, Mr. Moore, I'll just need a card for verification." Elijah reached into his wallet, pulled out his obsidian card, rare metal, weighty, the kind you don't apply for, the kind that finds you when your success gets too loud to ignore. He placed it gently on the counter. Haley froze for half a beat, then smirked. A small mocking sound slipped out before she could stop it. "Oh, wow, you have one of these?" Her voice carried disbelief dressed as humor. One of the men near the elevator snickered again. Elijah didn't flinch. He'd lived through this tone before. The one that assumed he was pretending. The one that thought the symbol of his success was a borrowed costume. "Is there a problem?" he asked quietly. Haley shrugged, still smiling. "No, it's just, we don't usually see these from, She stopped herself halfway, realizing too late that the silence had turned thick. Behind Elijah, a bellhop shifted awkwardly. Someone coughed. Time slowed down just long enough for the insult to finish landing. Elijah gave her one last chance to recover. She didn't take it. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and said, "Cancel it." A pause. Then into the phone, "Yes, the entire deal. Effective immediately." Haley blinked. "I'm sorry." "Cancel what?" He ended the call. "The partnership," he said calmly. "It's over." He took his card, slid it back into his wallet, and gave a faint smile. "I'll stay somewhere else." Then he turned, collected his bag, and walked out, quiet, deliberate, final. No shouting. No scene. Just silence that felt heavier than any argument. Behind him, the lobby seemed to exhale in confusion. People exchanged glances. The air, moments ago filled with smug laughter, now carried something else. Realization. At the far end of the hall, the assistant manager, Lydia Grant, had seen the whole exchange. She was halfway through a phone call when she froze. Her gut told her she'd just witnessed something much bigger than a misunderstanding. By the time she reached the front desk, Elijah Moore was gone. "What happened?" she demanded. Haley popped her gum nervously. "Some guy tried to check in with a fake card or something. Got weird when I questioned it." Lydia frowned. "Fake? Yeah, those metal ones. They're supposed to be for like CEOs or whatever. Didn't look the type." Lydia's fingers moved fast over her tablet, checking the guest list. When Elijah's name appeared, her eyes widened. "Haley," she said, voice low but sharp. That was Elijah Moore, CEO of Horizon Logistics. "He's the reason the entire Zenith Group is staying here this weekend." Haley blinked, color draining from her face. "Wait, what?" "That fake card was real," Lydia snapped. He was finalizing a $4 billion contract and you just sent him out the door laughing. Silence. The hum of the lobby returned, but now it sounded different, nervous, brittle. Haley's throat tightened. I didn't know. No, Lydia cut in. You didn't think. And that mistake might have just cost this hotel its future. Upstairs in the executive suite, 3 Zenith Group executives, Marcus Lee, Dana Wells, and Oliver Trent, were finalizing tomorrow's presentation. Laptops open, charts ready, confidence steady, until Lydia walked in, pale and tense. Mr. Moore's gone, she said. Marcus looked up. Gone where? He left. Canceled his reservation. Said the deal is off. The room went still. Dana frowned. What are you talking about? The contracts are signed, the press release. There was an incident at the front desk, Lydia said slowly. Oliver leaned forward. Define incident. One of our clerks laughed at his payment card, Lydia admitted. In front of guests. Marcus's jaw tightened. So you're telling me a $4 billion partnership just collapsed over a laugh? No, Dana said quietly. It collapsed over disrespect. The realization hit all 3 at once. Marcus exhaled sharply. We're finished. He's not coming back. Lydia nodded. He doesn't shout. He doesn't argue. He just ends things. Downstairs, Haley sat frozen behind the desk as the bellhop Terry approached cautiously. You ever meet someone, he said softly, who doesn't need to prove anything? That man wasn't angry. He was deciding whether we were worth his time. And now he's decided. Haley didn't answer. She just stared at the empty lobby doors, the ones Elijah had walked through, and felt the weight of what her laughter had cost. Because outside that glass, a man who had built an empire from nothing had just turned his back, and the world was about to find out why. Elijah didn't drive far. Just across the street, a small boutique hotel named The Haven stood quietly between glass towers, modern, modest, and honest. No grand chandelier, no fake smiles. Just a desk clerk who looked him in the eye and said, Welcome, Mr. Moore. He nodded, appreciating how those 3 words already felt different. Respect doesn't need to be expensive. It just needs to be real. Up in his room, the city stretched wide beyond the window, skyscrapers glowing like a circuit board. He loosened his tie and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence settle. His phone buzzed once. It was Renee, his chief operations officer. Renee, everything okay? You just canceled the meeting? Elijah, everything's fine. Just lost interest in partnering with people who don't know value when it's standing right in front of them. He hung up. No rant, no long explanation. Elijah Moore didn't believe in wasting energy where dignity was dismissed. But that silence he carried, it was already echoing through boardrooms. Across the city in a glass-walled conference suite high above downtown, panic had started. The Zenith Group's board members stared at each other in disbelief. Canceled? Without notice? Dana demanded. Yes, Marcus replied, scrolling through his phone. His assistant just confirmed. Horizon Logistics withdrew entirely. No reschedule. No appeal. That deal was supposed to finalize tomorrow, Oliver said, voice trembling. Do you understand what this means for the shareholders? For the press? Dana's voice dropped to a whisper. He didn't do this for money. He did it for a message. The 3 executives exchanged looks. They all knew what kind of man Elijah was. Strategic, quiet, calculated. When he acted, it was never random. Down in the lobby, Lydia stood behind a pillar, watching chaos unfold. The general manager barked orders, PR was already drafting statements, and Haley, the clerk, sat pale and speechless, replaying her mistake over and over. The bellhop, Terry, approached her again. You know, he said gently, I've seen people lose their temper over wrong bookings, cold coffee, anything. But that man? He didn't yell. He just decided. Like the world bends when he moves, Haley didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was already written across her face. At the Haven, Elijah ordered nothing more than tea and silence. His phone rang again. Andre, his business partner of 15 years. Andre, tell me this is temporary. Elijah, no, it's permanent. Andre, you do realize this puts a hole in the entire southern expansion plan? Elijah, then maybe that hole needed to exist. Andre sighed through the line. You're burning a $4 billion bridge because someone laughed at you. Elijah's reply came slow and deliberate. No, Andre. I'm walking away from people who think respect has a price tag. You can rebuild a bridge, but you can't rebuild character once you sell it. The line went quiet. Andre understood. Elijah turned off his phone, leaned back, and looked out at the city lights. He thought about all the times this had happened in quieter forms. The jokes, the doubts, the assumptions. People seeing the suit but not the struggle. The face but not the fire. He wasn't new to disrespect. He'd just stopped accepting it in installments. By morning, the story had started leaking through whispers and corporate circles. Someone from Zenith's internal team had already hinted at a disagreement. Then another said a misunderstanding. By lunchtime, finance blogs were speculating, and hashtags started to appear. CEO cancels billion-dollar deal over hotel incident. Obsidian card controversy. Was this racial profiling or corporate suicide? The internet had questions. And Elijah, as usual, stayed quiet. At Zenith's headquarters, meetings turned into damage control. Lydia stood before a panel of executives and lawyers explaining what happened. Haley sat in the corner, pale and shaking. So, said the regional director, you thought his card was fake? Haley swallowed. I just joked. I didn't mean, intent doesn't erase impact, the director interrupted sharply. You mocked a VIP guest in public. Do you have any idea what this costs us? Haley's voice cracked. I didn't know who he was. That's the problem, the director said coldly. You thought respect was optional. Across the table, a lawyer took notes. Expect public backlash within 24 hours, he muttered. This isn't just bad PR. This is brand-level damage. Lydia closed her eyes. She already knew it was too late. That afternoon, Elijah received a message from Maya, his younger sister back in Oklahoma. Maya, just saw your name trending. What happened? Elijah, nothing new. Just the same story told louder. Maya, you okay? Elijah, I'm used to it. Doesn't mean I'm numb. He placed the phone down and walked over to the window. The city looked small from above, glittering but fragile. He remembered the first time he'd been told he didn't belong. It wasn't in a hotel. It was in a classroom. He was 16, top of his class, first in every exam. His teacher had asked him, half joking, You sure you didn't cheat? That same tone. That same disbelief. Now decades later, billions in, and still the same test. Just in a better building. But Elijah wasn't angry. He was calculating. Every emotion he felt, he turned into strategy. He knew silence carried farther than outrage. Noise fades. Dignity echoes. At 6 p.m., while Zenith's executives were scrambling for statements, Elijah opened his laptop and typed a single message to Renee. Prepare the internal memo. No press statement yet. Let the story breathe. Truth doesn't need a megaphone. Then he leaned back and smiled faintly. The storm wasn't over, it was just shifting direction. And by the next sunrise, the whole country would be talking about what power really looks like when it doesn't need to shout. By the time the sun came up the next day, the story wasn't just a rumor anymore, and it was a storm. News tickers scrolled across screens in every major city. Social media feeds burned with the same headline. Elijah Moore walks away from $4 billion deal after humiliation at luxury hotel. Some called it bold. Some called it foolish, but everyone was talking about it. At the Haven, Elijah sipped his coffee while watching the news quietly. Every channel was trying to guess his motives, his emotions, his next move. He didn't need to guess. He knew exactly what he was doing. Downstairs in the hotel lobby, a young server named Jalen recognized him. He hesitated for a moment, then approached. Mr. Moore? Elijah looked up. My dad runs a small logistics startup, Jalen said nervously. He talks about you all the time. How you built Horizon from nothing. He said you changed how the industry even thinks about efficiency. Elijah smiled softly. Your dad sounds like a builder. Tell him the only thing harder than building something is walking away from what doesn't deserve it. Jalen nodded, his eyes wide. Yes, sir. When the boy left, Elijah sat back, his gaze distant. The world was watching, but this wasn't the first time he'd had to teach it a lesson. Years ago, before the suits, before the jets and the boardrooms, there was a garage. Elijah grew up in a small neighborhood outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. His mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs at the post office. His father, Raymond, owned a car repair shop that always smelled like oil and coffee. Their dinner table was scratched, wobbly, and covered with bills, but it was sacred ground, the one place where the truth was spoken freely. It was at that table his father told him, "Son, the world's going to see your color before your talent, so make your talent too bright to ignore." Elijah didn't forget that. At 17, he was valedictorian, top scores, full scholarships on the horizon, until a local official redirected a major scholarship to a donor's son. No reason given, just a quiet shrug. That night, Elijah sat outside on the porch, rejection letter in hand, tears mixing with rain. His mother sat beside him and said softly, "Baby, some roads start unfair, but that don't mean you stop walking." And so he didn't. He went to college on loans, working nights fixing printers in a copy shop. That's where Horizon began, not from ambition but from necessity. He built a small tracking system for his father's garage, then refined it for larger clients. Within 10 years, that code turned into a global logistics software empire. But the world never stopped asking the same question. How did you get here? Not out of admiration, out of disbelief. And now, decades later, after proving himself 1,000 times over, they still couldn't see past their bias. He wasn't surprised. Just tired. That morning, his phone buzzed again. Andre had sent him a link. It was a trending thread on social media titled, "A Man Handed Over a Metal Card." They laughed. He canceled a 4B deal. The post was written by someone inside Zenith. It was clean, factual, almost surgical. Bullet points, verified details, no exaggeration, just receipts. And the last line hit harder than anything else. Power doesn't argue. Power walks away. By noon, it had 5 million views. At Zenith headquarters, the chaos turned into crisis. The boardroom, usually pristine, now looked like a war zone of phones, laptops, and raised voices. "Legal wants to issue an apology," said one executive. "Too late," said another. "You can't unembarrass a billionaire." Marcus, the COO, slammed a report on the table. "We're already bleeding. Investors are calling. Shareholders are demanding statements. And every outlet in the country wants a quote from Elijah Moore." Dana scrolled through her phone, expression grim. "He hasn't said a word, not one. And that's what's killing us. His silence is the headline." At that same moment, Elijah's silence was being dissected on national television. A morning show host in New York leaned forward, voice sharp. "This isn't just about a card. It's about assumptions. The invisible tests we give people before they're allowed to belong." The man could have owned the hotel and still got treated like he didn't belong there. Clips of Elijah speaking at old conferences filled the screen, calm, wise, composed. Viewers who had never heard of him before were now calling him a hero. Back in Atlanta, Haley sat in a small HR conference room, eyes red from crying. Across from her sat the regional director, Mr. Carlisle, and a company lawyer. Haley's voice cracked. "I swear I didn't mean to insult him. I just thought—" Carlisle interrupted. "You thought he didn't belong with a card like that. That's the problem. I didn't know who he was." Carlisle sighed. "You didn't need to know who he was. You just needed to treat him like someone who mattered." The lawyer closed his notebook. "We'll proceed with disciplinary action. Expect corporate to make a statement before the day ends." Haley broke down completely. But the damage was already irreversible, and the internet wasn't waiting for corporate PR to spin it. Meanwhile, Elijah sat in his hotel room, scrolling through the chaos. He wasn't angry. He was reflective. He clicked open an old folder in his laptop. Photos of his parents, the garage, his first office, the team that started Horizon. At the bottom was a scanned image of that old scholarship rejection letter. He smiled faintly. Some memories hurt less when you finally understand their purpose. Then he began typing. Not for the media, but for himself. Words that weren't designed to defend, but to remind. He wrote, "Every time someone doubts my worth, they remind me who I am. Every time someone laughs, they prove why I must keep building. Some people raise their voices to be heard. I prefer to move quietly because power isn't noise. It's direction." He stopped, read the words again, and closed the laptop. No need to post, not yet. The world would hear him soon, but on his terms. By Friday morning, the story wasn't just a headline. It had become a movement. Talk shows debated it, podcasts dissected it, and millions online echoed the same phrase. Power walks away. Every corner of the internet had an opinion. Some saw Elijah as a symbol of integrity. Others said he overreacted. But deep down, everyone knew this wasn't about a hotel. It was about something older, a lesson long overdue. Hashtags like Walkaway with Dignity and Elijah Moore Effect were trending worldwide. People began sharing their own stories, moments they were laughed at, dismissed, or underestimated because they didn't fit the part. A nurse from Chicago posted, "They thought I was the janitor until I started giving medical orders. I stayed quiet and let my work speak." A student from Texas wrote, "My professor said people like me don't become engineers. I graduate next month. Guess I proved them wrong." The comment section turned into a digital protest, not of anger but of truth. At Zenith's corporate office, panic had turned into exhaustion. Every department was scrambling. PR drafted apologies, legal drafted disclaimers, executives drafted resignation letters. The general manager, Lydia, was summoned to an emergency board call. Her voice shook as she gave her report. "The hotel has become a global headline. News agencies are calling hourly. Investors are threatening to withdraw." One of the directors asked, "Has Mr. Moore responded?" "No," Lydia said quietly. "He hasn't said a single word." Another director slammed his fist on the table. "That silence is killing us. We need him to speak even if it's anger." But Elijah didn't owe them words. He'd already given them his answer, and the deal was gone, and so was he. Across town at the Haven, Elijah was having breakfast with his COO, Renee. She looked exhausted but proud. "You realize what you started, right?" she asked. "I didn't start anything," Elijah replied. "I just stopped pretending." Renee chuckled weakly. "Still, you've got the country's attention. People are calling you the quiet architect of consequence." He smiled faintly. "Catchy, but I'm not a symbol. I'm just tired of paying for rooms that don't respect the guest." Renee leaned in. "They'll spin this story 100 ways before the day ends. Maybe you should speak." Elijah looked out the window at the skyline, sunlight spilling between towers. "Not yet. Words mean nothing until people are ready to listen." By noon, a talk show host in Los Angeles was practically shouting into the camera. "This man didn't cancel a deal over ego. He canceled it to remind the world that money can't buy humanity. You think it's just one hotel clerk? This happens every day to people without the platform to fight back." Clips of Elijah walking through lobbies, shaking hands at conferences, giving past speeches, flooded the internet. He'd become the face of calm defiance, a living example that silence can be louder than rage. Even the hotel's own employees started speaking up. Terry, the bellhop who had witnessed everything, posted online, "I've worked in that hotel for 6 years. I've seen arrogance, fame, and entitlement. But Elijah Moore, he carried himself like peace in a storm. When he walked out, you could feel the respect follow him. That's real power." His post went viral, millions of shares, thousands of comments. People weren't just reading the story now. They were living through it. That evening, Elijah finally checked his messages. One from Maya stood out. "Maya, you just made national news. They're calling it the Walkaway lesson. You okay?" "Elijah, I'm fine. Just watching the world remember what respect looks like." Maya, "Mom would have been proud." Elijah paused. He looked at the old photo on his desk. His mother's smile, his father's rough hands. They'd both passed years ago, but their words still guided him like a compass that never lost north. He whispered, "I just kept walking, Mom." For the first time in days, he let himself breathe deeply. Later that night, he attended a quiet mentoring event at a small community center in South Atlanta, a promise he'd made months ago. He thought about canceling, but something in him refused. When he arrived, the room was filled with young professionals and students. The air buzzed with nervous excitement. Some whispered, "That's him." Others just stared. Elijah stood behind a plain wooden podium. No spotlight, no cameras, just raw humanity. He began softly. "I was asked to talk about leadership and success today. But after this week, I think we need to talk about something else. Power." The room fell silent. He continued, "Most people think power is about being loud, or having control, or making people afraid. But that's not real power. Real power is knowing who you are and knowing when to walk away." A murmur of agreement swept through the audience. Elijah smiled faintly. "You don't have to fight every battle that challenges your worth." Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to leave the room that doesn't see your value. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. In my career, I've signed deals worth billions. But I've also been mistaken for the driver at my own headquarters. That's the world we live in. The question is, what do you do with that? He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but commanding. You remind them, with silence, with dignity, with results. If they don't respect your presence, they don't deserve your partnership. A young man in the front whispered, facts, and the room softly chuckled. The tension broke into understanding. Elijah continued, don't waste your energy proving your worth to people who measure it by ignorance, because every step you take with purpose teaches them more than words ever could. As he spoke, phones recorded quietly, capturing every word. They didn't know it yet, but those clips would go viral within hours, spreading faster than any headline the hotel or Zenith could produce. One student wiped tears as he whispered, he didn't walk away to run, he walked away to rise. And Elijah, standing in that simple room full of hope, realized something powerful. He hadn't just ended a deal. He'd started a mirror, one the world couldn't stop looking into. By Saturday morning, the world wasn't just watching Elijah Moore. It was listening. Clips from his community speech had gone viral overnight. Hashtags like "the Walkaway lesson" and "Know Your Worth" trended in over 20 countries. News outlets called it the quiet revolution of dignity. Major newspapers printed his quotes on front pages. If they don't respect your presence, they don't deserve your partnership. Real power is knowing when to leave the room. It was no longer just Elijah's story. It was everyone's story. Every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Every professional who'd been underestimated. Every dreamer who'd been dismissed before being seen. At Zenith Group, chaos had turned to collapse. Shareholders were furious. The media pressure was relentless. Within 48 hours, 2 executives had resigned, including Marcus, the COO. An emergency press conference was scheduled, but every question was about one man. Have you spoken to Mr. Moore? Did your staff profile him? Will you apologize publicly? The PR director's voice cracked as cameras flashed. We deeply regret the incident that occurred, he stammered. We've reached out to Mr. Moore for a private conversation, but Elijah wasn't taking calls. He didn't need to. His silence had already spoken. That evening, Elijah sat in his office at Horizon headquarters, a sleek glass space overlooking the city that once ignored him. The sunset painted the skyline gold, and for a moment he just watched it, peaceful and still. Renee entered quietly. You ready for this? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, it's time. They'd decided he would finally release a statement, not for damage control but for direction. A message not to justify but to clarify. Elijah opened his laptop, paused for a long breath, and began to type. I didn't cancel a deal because of pride. I canceled it because partnership without respect isn't partnership, it's submission. Success means nothing if you have to shrink yourself to keep it. I built Horizon from the ground up with people who believed in dignity as the foundation of progress. That hasn't changed. I didn't walk away to make noise. I walked away to make room for better voices, better values, better people. And to anyone who's ever been laughed at, doubted, or dismissed, keep walking. Because every step you take with purpose leaves a mark that ignorance can't erase. He read it over once, smiled, and hit send. Within minutes, the statement spread across every platform. The responses were overwhelming. Business leaders praised his conviction. Civil rights advocates called it a modern lesson in grace. Parents showed the clip to their kids. And across the city, in a quiet apartment, Haley sat watching the same post, tears in her eyes. The weight of what she had done pressed deeper than any punishment could. Her boyfriend glanced over. You okay? She shook her head. I just wish I'd listened before I laughed. Sometimes lessons don't arrive with lectures. They arrive as consequences. A week later, Elijah returned to Tulsa for the first time in months. He drove through the old neighborhood, past the cracked sidewalks and the corner store where he used to buy candy after school. He stopped in front of the garage, the same one his father had once run. The paint was faded, the sign nearly gone, but the smell of oil and summer heat brought it all back. He stepped inside. Dust danced in the sunlight, cutting through the half-open door. On the old workbench lay a rusted wrench and a single photo, his father and him, smiling after fixing their first car together. He picked it up and whispered, "We made it. Dad." His phone buzzed again. A message from Maya. "They're replaying your speech everywhere. You've become a symbol." He smiled softly. "Tell them I'm not a symbol," he typed back. "I'm a reminder." He slipped the photo into his jacket and stepped back outside. That same evening, Elijah gave one last talk at a small university auditorium in Oklahoma. Students filled the seats, eager, silent, hopeful. He stood at the podium, hands resting lightly on the edge, and began, "I grew up right here. I've been told no more times than I can count. I've been looked at like I didn't belong in rooms that I built my own way into. But the truth is, belonging isn't granted. It's claimed." He paused. The audience leaned closer. "They told me I overreacted, that I should have ignored it. But silence isn't weakness, and it's wisdom. You can shout and be ignored, or you can move and make the world follow. I chose to move." He took a deep breath, his voice low and steady. "When they laugh at your value, don't argue. Build something so strong that their laughter becomes applause they'll never get to hear." A hush filled the room, the kind that feels like understanding. He smiled, the calm of a man who had already made peace with everything behind him. Walk away from noise. Walk toward purpose. And when you do, walk tall. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted minutes. Some were crying. Others just clapped in quiet reverence. Later that night, Elijah stood outside looking up at the stars. The air was cool, still, and full of unspoken gratitude. He whispered, "You see, Mom? You were right. The road wasn't straight, but it was mine." A soft wind brushed past him like an answer. He smiled, put his hands in his pockets, and began walking toward his car. Not fast, not slow, just steady, because sometimes the loudest thing a man can say is nothing at all. The end.